Hi, I'm Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio. In my last video, I auditioned quilting designs for this Dresden Plate quilt, and in this video, I'm doing the quilting. Now, I chose more traditional quilting designs for this block for the most part, and I started in the center, and I am doing a feather around a small circle. Now, in the designs that I auditioned, there was one that looked like a flower in the center, and it only had 5 or 6 petals in it. But I chose to go with more petals and make it more of a feathered design for this quilt. I felt it needed just a little bit more quilting in the center since it is a pretty large circle here in the center of the plates. And I'm using manual mode here, and I'm going about 50 stitches per inch. I think I got a smoother feather that way. Now for the blades, I chose to do an outline stitch, and I'm using my little Archangel ruler here to do that, and I just followed around each of the blades with a 1/4 inch outline stitch. And for this portion of the quilt, I am using regulated mode and about 10 stitches per inch. Now in vintage quilts, especially when they have been used, like this one is obviously a used quilt, you'll see a lot of puckering or extra fabric, some pleats and stuff in the piecing, and I don't work real hard to get all of that out because that would just leave additional puffiness in the quilt in places. So in the areas where the fabric is already pleated, I just quilt over it and just leave it the way it is. Now, one thing I found with this quilt as I was working with it is that the pink sashing and the border is not 100% cotton. And I found that out when I was pressing back the binding on the quilt to hand sew it, and my iron was a little too hot and it scorched it in one place. And I was kind of questioning that as I looked over this quilt before I bought it, and wasn't quite sure if it was cotton enough or not because it was a real soft feeling fabric. So I think it's a cotton poly blend, and it's just that it has been used and washed enough that that fabric has softened up and it feels real close to cotton. And it also got me to wondering if maybe this quilt had also been in a different setting and the person took it apart and put new sashing in it. That's a possibility. It also is possible that these blocks had been sitting for a long time in somebody's dresser drawer in a box somewhere, and someone came along and decided to put these in a set and make a quilt out of it, and they used a poly cotton fabric, because the pink in this these borders is not a 30s pink. It's a little bit too pale for that, a little too pastel. So there's just another possible story for this quilt. Now as I worked my way around these blades, you can see how that quilting just really brings out that plate. Quilting really does make a difference in these quilts. Now for the background, I decided to go with some feathers, and this is another formal feather where you do the tracing back over the top of the quilt. On top of the feather. And I did that in all 4 corners. And I marked this block ahead of time with some faint lines using an air-soluble marker so that I had the diagonals pretty even, and I knew how far to go up the block where I needed to stop the quilting before I started the next border or the next corner. These blocks are different sizes. They average about 15 inches, but there's 2 or 3 that are closer to 16 inches. So not every block was exactly the same. And some of these, the blades are just right up to that border, and others there's some background fabric all the way around the block, all the way around the plate. In this one you can see top and bottom of this plate, there's a little bit of space for quilting, but on the left and the right, those blades are almost exactly on the edge of that block, so you can't get quilting in there very easily. Now with these feathers, I am just filling in the space the best I can, and not worrying about getting every single fraction of an inch quilted in this quilt. So I'm just taking my time, and I am in a stitch regulated mode at 10 stitches per inch, and just quilting along. Now when I get done with one corner, I just follow along the ditch and get to the next corner. And then I start with a center purl that you can see here, and then go up one side of the mark that I have made in that corner there, filling in the space, and then going back around to fill in the rest of the space that's available there for quilting. Now my lighting is not the best. I have still to figure out how to get good lighting here. My studio has very good lighting. It's just that the machine throws a shadow, and even though I have portable lighting shining at an angle to go underneath the machine, I'm still not getting the best lighting. So I'm still working on that, and hopefully in the future I'll have that all worked out, and you'll be able to see the quilting a little bit better. Of course, quilting tone on tone is a little bit difficult to see. But here you can see that feather in that corner pretty well. Now for the sashing and the borders, I decided to combine some traditional along with some more modern freehand quilting. And what I chose to do was to go ahead and stitch along the top and the bottom edge of the sashing with a 1/4 inch outline stitch. And I'm using my long ruler for this, and just using it as a guide as I stitch along. And within that sashing, I am doing swirls and leaves. With a lot of freehand quilting, one trick is to just combine some designs that you know well already. And in this one, swirls and leaves are something that I'm very comfortable with, so I just decided to combine those together. And if you can notice, these leaves and these swirls are flipping position from one set to the next. In one, the leaf and the swirl are pointing up, and the next one they're pointing down. And that just gives it a little bit more interest and a little bit more motion in your quilt. And I did the same thing with the sashes. They're vertical as well as horizontal, and I also did that for the outer sashes. Now this quilt doesn't really have a border, it just has a sashing, and I chose not to add anything extra to this quilt. So here it is. There's a section all completed, and in the next pictures you will see the completed quilt with a few close-ups. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if so, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and thanks for watching.